Okay. Welcome, everyone, to Senate Education Committee. Today, we're going to start off with, first we're going to have roll call. I'll try to remember to do that. Monday, I was taking some cold medicine. I wasn't sure even what my name was, so if you would mind taking roll, that would be great.
Absolutely, Madam Chairman. For Senate Education, January 22nd, 2025, Senator Brennan. Here. Senator Olson.
Here.
Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
Senator Scott.
Here.
Chairwoman Schuler.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Thank you very much. Today, we're going to continue on our discussion with Senate File 73 Charter School Funding Amendments. Senator Brennan had presented the bill, and we'd started to take some testimony, but we didn't get all the way through it. It was kind of a long day that day. So we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. So anyone that would like to provide some testimony on Senate File 73 Charter School Funding Amendments, please come forward. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
All right. Madam Chair, committee members, thank you. I actually, hold on to your chairs. I'm gonna shock everybody here. I'm in favor of this bill.
And could you introduce yourself too?
Oh gosh, I got so excited for the grand opening, I forgot to introduce myself. Shoot. Tristan Green, Albany County School District Chief Financial Officer, which would have made the grand opening a whole lot better had I started with that. So now you can hold on to your chairs because yes, I am a school district advocating for this bill. And I'm advocating for this bill because I know all too well how hard it is to run a district. And just using your school resources, it's tough. And so I think it's great that you're realizing that there is a need for them to have this extra funding to run their school as they see fit. However, the problem is I'm hearing it's going to come from district funds. So you're going to take from one entity and their opportunities to give to another. And so while I applaud you for listening to the public and coming up with these alternative education systems for our students, I just worry that if you're not able to fund them, then we're gonna have to fund them, to which some of the districts have already said no to the state authorized charters because they couldn't fund them. It's not because they didn't want another opportunity for their students. It's because with rising costs, we just can't do it. And so I just ask that you please, as you move forward in looking at all these different education mechanisms, that you make sure that it doesn't come at the cost of the public K-12 education kids. You know, those 3,500 kids deserve the same opportunities that the charter schools do. The charter school kids deserve the same opportunities that the other schools do. They all deserve the opportunity. And if they all need it and we choose to fund it, then that's what we should choose to do, but not at the expense of another. You know, you yourselves have said before that we're doing great things in education. Our scores are coming up, and all amongst coming out of a pandemic to where it's obvious that there are major mental health issues. Our special ed numbers are just increasing drastically. And if we're supposed to help provide a fun education and help make school fun again, how are we to do that if resources are being taken from us? How are we continue to do the good work that we're doing if those resources are being taken from us? How are the charter schools to perform as well without their funding? So I do ask for your favorable consideration in this bill, but not at the expense of the districts. I stand for questions.
Questions for Ms. Green, please? Yes, go ahead, Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, my question is on the special ed statement you made. It's kind of off the bill. Is that all right, Madam Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
You were saying the massive increase in special ed spending. Could you elaborate on that a bit more? Because that's You know, I know it's been going up, but I haven't heard that before.
Yes, Madam
ahead, Ms.
Chair,
Green.
sorry, Madam Chair, Senator. Yes, we do, our numbers are increasing as far as the students that are being identified as needing some extra resource. That has grown. We also are dealing with, kindergartners that are coming in and they're not necessarily identified as having a disability, however, they're not potty trained. And so they're not potty trained. And so our districts are, our teachers are having to battle a lot more than what they used to, and really having to work with some emotional issues and just helping all of our kids.
Follow up? Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Do you have any figures on the increase in special ed numbers or costs?
I don't
Green?
have any increased, Madam Chair, Senator, I don't have any increased numbers in kids with me right now. I can get that to you. There's also a special education report that WDE puts out that you can see how our numbers have grown. But I can tell you that already we grew 1 million from 23 to 24. And already I'm 1.5 million over my special education costs from last year. And that was at the middle of the year as of December. We're not finished yet.
Don't follow up? Yes, go ahead.
Madam
Senator.
Chairman, I don't think we need any further from Albany County, but I will try to follow up with our staff.
Okay.
Because if we're getting an explosion in special ed costs, we need to know about that.
Other questions for Ms. Green? I just have one, and again, not having been on the committee last year or the last 2 years when this was discussed, and I'm not sure if you can answer it, but maybe someone in the room can. My understanding was that the charter schools got a block grant just like the K-12 schools. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, we pass through the school resource level funding to charter schools.
Okay. All right, that answered my question. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Just to follow up on that, but, traditionally, the district level resources would go to the district for a charter school. This bill is trying to look at circumstances where and I think it mostly applies to a situation where you have a state charter school that doesn't use the district's administrative functions. And so it's eliminating, this legislation eliminates the district level portion of the ADM from going to the district, and it then goes to the charter school. For Albany County, the two schools that are charter schools are both district charter schools that utilize the district support structure. So it seems that by eliminating it in this bill, and I think we've got the numbers here, it looks like it's about, what was it, on the order of $500,000, nope, not quite, 300-ish thousand dollars between the two that would shift from the district to the charter schools. And I mean, that's the purpose of the bill. It seems that would be detrimental to the district, and since the district is doing those services, how would the district account for those required services and the payments needed for those required services if we didn't find a way to work through that, or would that be managed through the agreement between the district and the charter schools?
Ms. Green?
Madam Chair, Senator, and so I do have the benefit of two district authorized charters as of now, which allows us to talk about the funding and what services we're going to provide. If we were to have to then not be able to negotiate those contracts and have to pass through more funding to them, then there would be resources that we wouldn't be able to provide to them without a charge, because I wouldn't want it to come from one of our programs, athletic or academic.
And Madam Chairman, how often are those agreements in Albany County negotiated? So if this bill goes into effect, would that flow naturally with the contract negotiation between the district and the charter school? Or would that cause some timeline problems where you're operating under a contract that assumes that this money was already going to the district and now you need an update?
Ms. Green?
Madam Chair, Senator, and so when you instituted the law that allowed for the 3% administrative fees, we talked to the charter and they explained that that could maybe cause some litigation because we were in a 5-year contract. And so I would expect the same respect with this change as a matter of to the funding going the other way. And so I would expect it, once our 5-year contract was up, then we would have the negotiations as to what they wanted to continue to do and not do.
Madam Chairman, so
Go ahead.
if you're in a 5-year contract though, and the statute changes and we don't, you're statutorily obligated to provide a different stream of funding to the school as the baseline. I guess the question is, does the contract that you have in place already account for such a change? I wouldn't necessarily expect it to. I would expect you to be short of these funds under the current contract.
Ms. Green?
Madam Chair, Senator, that is correct. If we were forced to pass through these funds, then that's what we would have to do. We would also then ask to renegotiate the services, and it would become a not fun conversation and just create a lot of undue tension.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Green? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Anyone else that would like to come up and testify on this bill? Welcome. Please introduce yourself. Yeah, we keep thinking we should fix that chair every time somebody comes, is fixed. Okay, good. Because we can see your face. Yesterday, we about lost somebody.
Madam Chair, good morning. Carrie Klein, I'm with the Wyoming Public Charter School Association. And I'll offer a few comments and then can, I think, address a little bit of the district contract conversation that we've had with schools. So thank you for considering this bill. I think this bill really addresses an important funding inequity that's currently existing for public charter schools. And please recall, this would allow public charter schools to receive a proportion, so their proportional allocation of the school funding model for these components, both for the personnel dollars that are listed under the two components, and also the non-personnel supply items, which in my understanding is items that are used at a school level to provide supplies, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, whatever those things might need. Currently, districts are retaining these funds for the component dollars that the charter schools are generating as part of their district allocation. So flowing the funding to the school that's providing the services seems to be a common sense way to ensure that the students are getting the state dollars that are allocated for their education. When it comes to the district charter schools, the association has been messaging to the district authorized schools that they do have contracts in place, and those contracts are part of what exists between authorizers and the school they're authorizing. And so when we talk about, the change in funding, what we're telling the charter schools is, yes, this would change it so that you are entitled to these funds. But there's an understanding that your contract could look different and that the district could be providing those services and that you need to negotiate in good faith honestly on that. The other thing that we've noticed is that really important to explain to the district schools the difference between the 3% that statutorily, and I will say this has been there for a long time. This is kind of an industry standard across the country for charter schools to spend up to 3%, give up to 3% to their district for the direct overseeing of the duties that the authorizer must do for them. And that's a completely different pot of money than what we're talking about here. And so it has been an educational piece for us to help them understand. You've got your component foundational model funding that you're generating as part of the district. And then there's this other allocation that the district could reasonably use for overseeing your school. So just wanted to let you know that is a conversation we've had with them, so that we're hoping that they understand the differences between the two. I would, just say that I would caution us against creating some kind of statute that would do a state versus district authorized charter schools. I think we need to be very careful and make sure that public charter schools are public charter schools. And I do think 21.3.314, at the end of this, it's section E, and I can get you that particular reference, still says the district and charter school may by mutual agreement fund the charter school through a specific budget for the charter school. So I think statutorily, there's still language in that says, at the end of the day, the authorizer and the district, or it's authorized, the authorizer and the school it's authorizing have that contractual agreement. So I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Ms. Klein? Go ahead, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Klein, you said something that's really important in the context of trying to walk through the previous testimony and the concern that we might take money from the district on behalf of the charter school, but you said that the charter school would receive its proportional basis of the funding. So it's the funding that would be allocated for that particular, being allocated based on the school's, it's this funding that would already be allocated, so they're receiving their own funding. Is that, do I understand that right?
Ms. Klein?
Madam Chairman, Senator Olson, that's my understanding, and we do have the departments here, and I know that they can speak to greater detail about how it's calculated, but it's our understanding that the charter school is calculated in the district's foundational model. So the dollar amount going to the district includes the number of students that are in the charter school. And what this does, and this was a discussion on how to best do this, would be to calculate the percentage of students that the charter school makes up in the entire district, and to use that percentage to allocate the proportional amount of what they're generating within the model that would flow through to them.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you. Ms. Klein, it sounds like you've talked to the schools about how they would move forward with this in place. And the concern I have is honestly really only in the short term while a contract is still in place, that a contract didn't account for this legislation. And what you end up with is a circumstance where the district level resources for a district authorized charter school, which is about $1,000 per ADM, $1,000 per ADM. That was assumed prior to negotiating the contract, that the district level resources would stay at the district. And then beyond that would be the negotiation. All right, well, we need these services, we need these services, and so you come up with a negotiation. We're changing the baseline through this legislation. The next time it's negotiated, I don't think that's going to be a problem, candidly. I think you just then negotiate based on your circumstances. But I do see a potential shortfall and an inequity for the next few years prior to that negotiation. Do you think that the schools would be willing to renegotiate that contract? Have you had conversations with them to account for that change for those that are expecting district level authorization services? In other words, those central district services that go with the ADM? Or is this something that we need to figure out a way to deal with? And I agree that trying to restructure statute to account for it for what is probably a 2-year problem on average, would be unfortunate, but that doesn't mean there isn't a problem for a couple of years. What are your thoughts?
Madam Chair, Senator Rothfuss, I can't speak directly for the schools. I'm happy to facilitate conversation with them. The conversations I have had lead me to believe that they're reasonable people and they understand the nuance here. It was not the intent to try and put any contract already in existence in any kind of jeopardy, or to create a situation where there's some, litigation or people are getting angry. That was not the intent for this. So I would say with confidence that I think that they will happily come to the table and decide if they can do it amongst themselves and be fine, or if we need to be more prescriptive about it. And I'm not a contract lawyer, so I'm not sure how all those things work, but I think we're all willing to work on this.
Yeah, and Madam Chairman, it would depend on how those contracts are written, and obviously, I haven't seen those contracts either. Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Klein? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Welcome, please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Cindy Delancey. I'm here today in my capacity as the Vice Chair of the Charter School Authorizing Board. I know our Chairman, Ms. Bayteski, is online with us today. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make the trip to Wyoming for some unforeseen circumstances that she's working through right now. So I don't mean to steal her thunder at all, but I wanted to come and just thank Senator Brennan and Senator Olson for bringing this piece of legislation forward. I know a lot of work has gone into this, and I wanted to speak in support of Senate File 73. In addition to that, to my left, I'm pleased and proud to introduce our new Executive Director, Mr. John Waller. He has come on staff to help us navigate through these very interesting and dynamic times, and to bring some additional resources to the board to supplement the excellent support from the department that we receive. Mr. Waller is part of the governor's staff that has been assigned to work with us, and we're very pleased to have him on board, Madam Chairman. So with your permission, maybe Mr. Waller could introduce himself and just make him known to the committee for a moment. Thank you.
Certainly, that'd be just fine. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm pleased to be here, and I appreciate your support. I would entertain any questions, Madam Chair. Do you guys have any questions for me? I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I'm a longtime administrator. Spent 30 years as administrator in Colorado. Then I spent 3 years as a principal up here in Laramie 1 at Hobbs Elementary School. Had a great experience. Thought I was going to retire. This job came along. It was very interesting to me. And so I have been on this job for 2 months and really enjoyed getting to meet people. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've now visited all of the schools, and I'm reinvigorated after being at those schools and seeing the great work that's being done. So it's been a wonderful start to this position.
Well, we appreciate having you here, and I don't know, does the committee have any questions for Mr. Waller or Mr. Lancey? Do you guys have anything you'd like to say about this particular bill, or are you just happy to be here this morning?
Madam Chairman, we'd like to speak in support of it. I know Ms. Bayteski will be offering some more specific testimony, but again, just wanted to come in her absence to speak in support that we've been working on this for a long time. We think it's a good piece of legislation and really appreciate the effort put it forth by Senator Brennan and Senator Olson. And also just wanted to introduce Mr. Waller. We're very excited to have him on board. As he indicated, he spent the majority of his career in the classroom, not the Capitol. So he'll be learning his way around here, and just appreciate your patience and grace as we continue to work through building our board and developing these conversations around charter schools in Wyoming. So with that,
Welcome,
thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Waller. We appreciate you coming today and look forward to seeing you around the Capitol.
Sounds great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to testify today in the room? Please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Brian Farmer. I'm the Executive Director of Wyoming School Boards Association. Madam Chairman, the committee has in front of it today a really interesting math problem. We have a math problem, and we have to ask the question of whether or not this bill presents the correct solution to the problem. I think there is ample evidence that there is some piece of funding missing for our charter schools. We've got to figure out how do we appropriately fund those charter schools. But Madam Chairman, I think it's necessary for us to back up and look at how we fund schools to determine whether or not this is the appropriate way to fund this deficit. And so, Madam Chairman, and I know that there are several new members of the committee, so you may know this and forgive me if I'm being too basic. But in our school finance system, we build a system that is not dollars allocated per kid. I think there's oftentimes a notion that we just come up with $1 per kid and then your allocation to the district is based on $1 per kid. We don't do that. We primarily fund schools. On top of that, we fund systems. Both of those are controlled by ADM. So the number of kids in those schools and the number of kids in those districts ultimately influences how we fund the schools. And so in the 35 or so elements in the school finance system, we look at those and I think of them kind of like Legos. And I think of them like Legos because I have a 5-year-old grandson who's soon to be 6. We got a bunch of Legos for Christmas and he built his Legos up the way that the box had. And then he quickly took them apart and made his own creations. And so I feel like that's what we're doing here. We're taking them apart and making our own creation, trying to think of how do we take the chunks and put them together. Well, when we fund schools, the prototypical school within the model is the initial basis for funding. And so we have within the model school level resources. And then we fund systems, which are essentially the districts, and those systems are funded by central office level resources. Now there's also something that is in addition to that, maintenance and operations, which includes things like utilities. And to Senator Rothfuss's question from Monday, where do we pay for things like insurance? According to Dr. Pikus, because I asked him in the last recalibration, we suggested that that is not adequately funded within the model. And he pointed to the M&O dollars, the maintenance and operations dollars, saying that it exists within that to fund the insurance programs. I can tell you that the 37 or so dollars allocated within that does not adequately fund everything that it's supposed to fund. And so that is an underfunded component of the model. But the pieces, when we get to the central office, tend to be chunks, tend to be blocks. So we fund a district and then it's adjusted for every 500 students ADM, every 1,000 students ADM, depends on that different component within the model. So for us to say we can just take and shave off based off of ADM and adequately fund those is not the way that the model was built. We're trying to now cut the Lego into smaller pieces so that we can rebuild it and make it work the right way. And so I think if we do approach it in this manner, what we end up doing is we end up with inequity. We end up with a disparity in the way that we are funding entities that is not uniform and is not equitable. So here's the example. In Casper, Natrona County, if we are to shave off per ADM for a charter school within that district and then fund central office that way, then we are funding the central office components of Natrona County School District differently than we are funding the central office components of Converse County School District number 1. So your 2 school districts are now funding their central offices in different ways. That is disparate. That is something that is not uniform. It is also disparate to the charter school. In essence, it's probably underfunding that because we are looking at the unit of the individual as opposed to the unit of the school or the system. And so by breaking it down in this way, we end up with a disparate treatment of school districts and disparate treatment of charter schools. So we all ultimately are funding our schools now in 3 different ways instead of in a consistent and uniform manner across the state. And so, Madam Chair, I think that there are possible solutions going forward that would do this, but I don't think the mechanism of this bill provides us that proper path forward. I think the different solutions we could look at is to treat, and with all due respect to our previous speakers, I think we have to treat district authorized charters differently than we have to treat state authorized charters. We have to look at the function of the school and what is the appropriate resource to be allocated to the school. And so much of the discussion today has really kind of been with regard to the district authorized charter. So currently, the district is getting some funding based on that district authorized charter, and how we split that pie is one problem. That's one math problem. And this solution might kind of work for that. But how we have the funding of a state authorized charter is a very different math problem. This does not work for that. And I think it's very important for us to look at those Legos we're putting together and know that we're not putting together in a system that creates a uniform funding. So if we were to treat the state authorized charters as its own district, and then we allocated the funds of the state authorized charter in that manner, then we would be treating those state authorized charters in the exact same way that we're treating district authorized charters. And so again, I would say that the solution presented in this bill might work when we're talking about a district authorized charter, but it clearly does not work when we're talking about the state authorized charter, because the relationship between the district and the charter is different. And ultimately, if you go through the math problem, I think you are going to end up underfunding both the district and the state authorized charter through this particular mechanism. Madam Chair, when we talked about this previously, we talked about who is the LEA, who is the local educational agency. If the school was the LEA, then it would be appropriate to make this allocation fully to each charter school as its own LEA. But because in the instance of the state has an LEA, the State Authorizing Charter Board, then making the allocation to that and divvying up the money according to the formula for state authorized charters would probably be appropriate. If we're looking at the instance of district authorized charters, then a mechanism like this might be appropriate, because now you're talking about how do you divide the pie between the district authorized charter and the district. But Madam Chair, how we get the pie itself is a very important question. Because if we're taking and saying, hey, if we just add the students and the school in a state authorized charter to a district, then we're not getting the same pie that we would have if we built a system for state authorized charters and a system for district authorized charters, which in reality is what we have. So we have this disparity that's resulting in potential for inadequate funding for districts, as well as inadequate funding for charters doing it this way. So, Madam Chairman, I caution the approval of this bill, particularly when we look at our state authorized charters, because it's going to end up in a disparate way of how we fund our schools and our districts. Not just disparity between the charter and the district, but disparity between a district that has a charter school and a district that does not. And that's because the first Lego that we're using is not based on the number of students, but based on a school. And so we need to take the math and do the math based on the system that we have, not looking for a workaround that's going to make money flow through in the right ways. Now, again, I will admit that when we're talking about a district authorized charter, this solution is potentially an acceptable solution. But when we're looking at a state authorized charter, it is clearly not the right solution. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions for Mr. Farmer? Yeah, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss. Oh, all right.
You can start.
Who wants to go first? Okay, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Farmer, it does, I agree. I'll start with that. Even though that was long and complex, I can simply say I agree. But with where these things need to end up resolving, it seems to me that this legislation would lead to it lining up more closely for a state authorized charter than would happen without this legislation in place. So I don't disagree that it ends up with the wrong answer, but it does seem like it ends up with a closer to equitable answer than not having it for a statewide charter, because the idea in this circumstance that you would have the district, like under current statute, having the district retain district level resources for a state authorized charter school of $1,000 per ADM when they're not providing that service is a clear and fundamental inequity. Now, handing it over, as I said, I agree that doesn't get you an appropriate level of equity, but it's the right direction to be traveling in terms of equity. Do you agree with that?
Mr. Farmer?
Madam Chairman, I think if we're looking for a right answer or a wrong answer, which is the way I tend to look at the law, I don't believe that close enough I don't think we're playing horseshoes. I think we have to be right or we're not right. It is either equitable or not equitable. And so I would not agree that we ought to go for close enough. I do think that a solution that serves all appropriately is the correct solution. Madam Chairman, I think we also have to be abundantly clear of whether a district now is receiving an allocation based off of some generation for a state level authorized charter. And I don't think that's the case. I think when you have a district, its funding is based off of the district level schools. I don't think it's getting an allocation for the state authorized charter, and then that allocation is not being passed on. If that's the case, the district should be reduced by whatever allocation that is extra. But again, that's a chunk, that's a big block Lego, not a little tiny piece Lego. And so the district should not be receiving funding for students that are not within the district.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, follow up.
But even though these students are state authorized, and I'll double check this, but it's my understanding that the ADM is counting still in that district, and that you would receive the district level resources for it, and we can double check that, but I didn't think that was inaccurate. I thought these funds are being developed by the model and are flowing to the district, that we'll call it the resident district instead of the district of the school. I'll verify that, but again, the plain text of the language here would suggest that that is the case, since there's no exception language provided for state authorized charter school. And again, as far as the first point that was made, the idea that it has to be perfectly equitable, we don't have perfect equity. We're the most equitable state in the country, but perfect equity is really hard to achieve. We struggle towards it, we move towards it. If we're passing a bill, I would hope that bill would always move us towards equity instead of away from equity. And so I guess I just have concerns with the idea that if this bill doesn't lead to a perfect equity solution, and once again, I agree with the idea and have touted it for years that we need, District 49 to exist for charter schools as an availability. I think that's a great approach. This bill doesn't do that. It can't do that. We can't amend it to do that. And we've talked about it a lot. It's a really hard lift. But in terms of if there's $1,000 per ADM out there, and we're thinking about what's the most equitable use for that $1,000, and we're talking about students that are attending a state authorized charter school, it seems that that needs to go to pay to the administrative resources for that child, as opposed to the administrative resources of the district that are not serving that child. I mean, that's just my natural inclination, even though there are challenges, there are problems, and there are details. But as a first approximation, wouldn't you agree that that's where those dollars should be spent, on that child?
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Farmer?
Senator Rothfuss, I would absolutely agree, but I think we have a fundamental misunderstanding of how that works. It's not my understanding that for central office resource, the district gets $1,000 for every kid. It's my understanding that the district office gets an allocation based on chunks, And for every 500 kids in some instances, for every 1,000 kids in some instances, that's what directs the central office level resource. We can certainly divide that by number of kids to get an allocation per student. But I don't think that the first Lego, the building block, works as to say, for every kid, you get $1,000 for your central office. And so if I come from the wrong misunderstanding, then certainly my logic is flawed.
Madam Chairman,
Yeah, Senator, go ahead.
sorry to follow up on that. No, and again, depending on where you're at in the funding model, that's going to be right. It's going to be an X plus kind of thing, but that fixed cost based on district size is going to get you your superintendent and a certain apportionment potentially of deputy superintendent, et cetera, at the district level, and certain static district level resources. But the plus for the rest of the equation is going to be an equation based on ADM. And then those resources are going to build up, and it's obviously nonlinear, which is why our small districts end up with substantially higher per ADM totals than our large districts. So that gets back to where we agreed earlier on the, is there perfect equity? No, there's not. And yes, this system does cause challenges. But, as this bill's written, it actually takes off the fixed cost for the district under the Romanet 6 and says, just look at the ADM and do a proportionate of the ADM aspect of it. So it separates out what the district's fixed cost is. Now, as you were saying earlier, yes, it's true that the fixed cost actually isn't fixed. It varies based on district size. So it's not perfect, but again, getting towards the idea of, is it more equitable with this bill or without this bill? It still seems to be more equitable with this bill, and I'm struggling to understand why it wouldn't be.
Mr. Farmer?
Madam Chair, I would agree it's more equitable. I think the disagreement is simply in what is the proper path forward, and I'm suggesting the proper path forward is something that's not before you.
I think Senator Brennan has a question. Go ahead.
I think that's,
Did he cover it?
yeah, thanks. Thank you. I think Senator Rothfuss has gotten us to where we want to be. But to kind of your point, in drafting this legislation, I worked with both the LSO and the Wyoming Department of Education because our funding formulas are complex. And so there are parts in this funding formula that we didn't touch, that it stays with the districts. We are just asking in this bill for a proportional amount based on the ADM, and there's other pieces that we didn't, and the department might have some comments kind of on the funding as it is complex. If it was simple, I don't think we would need this bill, because we would have it all figured out but I do appreciate that that this is more equitable this way. And also just, your thoughts on, we've got these public charter students are being counted in the number for the district. I mean, is it equitable for the district to retain that portion that amount of money that's being generated by that ADM of these students?
Mr. Farmer?
Madam Chair, the only thing that would be equitable is to the degree that the district is providing service for those students.
Any other follow-up? Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Farmer? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. Marguerite Herman, I'm here on my own behalf. I'm not representing any group, and I will just observe that I'm one of the few people in the building who is serving on a school board that approved and renewed charters as a district charter school. So I see the benefit of charter schools. This is not a criticism of any of that. But I would say that having watched over the years ago, the emphasis was always on efficiency and this body has entertained ideas for consolidating districts because big is cheaper, smaller is more expensive, and inevitably it never passes. And our school facilities department says, big is cheaper, let's go big, don't go small. And I think now we're appreciating choice. Choice in schools. Choice means small, and small has a cost. And I think that it's time for the legislature to kind of say, okay, we want to do this, what does it cost? And cost it out and calibrate it just like we do with the public schools. And give an honest evaluation. We know how to do it. We do calibration studies. We've done several. And I guess what I'm suggesting, we're talking about a third way forward, would simply to be, because these are sort of self-contained, standalone, they're not interwoven with the district as far as services or that sort of thing. So treat them as standalone, for lack of a better term, like small districts. And we have small districts in the state of 150 children. So we know how to do that. And I guess it's just to come up with a real cost-based number as the Constitution advises us to do, come up with a number. The administrations are unique. Everything about a small school is unique. As a matter of fact, as you well know, there's a new House Joint Resolution just been filed to extol the virtues of small rural schools, which, as we all know, which is why the cost per student in some districts are $30,000. But as a state, we value that. We value choice. We value small size, service to small groups of people. And I think, instead of trying to, and boy, I really appreciated that little tutorial here this morning about how things are allocated and that sort of thing, is just to deal with them as a standalone unit, which they are. I've become sort of familiar with the state authorizing board. I think they're doing a great job. They're still standing up the process of it, but I would just, I guess what I would say is that, lay this bill aside and do, a cost base. What does it cost? Because the testimony 2 days ago was pretty clear. They're not getting enough. It's not covering their costs. So I think it's time to sort of to come up with a real number based on real experience, which we have now, we didn't have before, and then fund them. Because I think as a state, we value them, we appreciate them, we've decided that this is something we want to support, and so I think it's just good to know what it costs and then follow through on that. So that would be my suggestion. Anyway, thank you. I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Any questions for Ms. Herman? Okay. No? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. Anyone else in the room? I think we have somebody online, don't we?
Yes, Madam Chairman, Janine Bayteski is online, letting her into the room now.
Super.
Hello?
Hi, please introduce yourself. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Senate Education Committee. I'm Janine Bayteski, and I am the chair of the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. This is sort of an interesting time to be having this discussion because if you reflect back, it was exactly 20 years ago when this school finance model and the statutes that resulted were approved by the legislature. And I don't think it was ever anticipated that we would be talking about state authorized charters that were standalone and separate from the district. I was very intrigued by Mr. Farmer's comments, and I totally agree with his analysis of how the school finance model works. 20 years ago, my 12-year-old daughter at the time testified before the legislature to make sure that school funding was fair and equitable to all. And as it sits right now, that I would say is not the case. I think we need to understand that these state authorized charter schools have performed central office functions such as payroll, any of the backroom kind of functions. And at the present time, what's happening is those functions are being funded through the resources that really should be going toward the education of the students versus the back room, performing the back room and central office functions for those students. The one thing that Mr. Farmer said that I think we really need to reflect on is this prototypical model and how this really works. So when you look at central office funding, I think it's pretty easy to be able to say on a per ADM basis what the material costs are on a per student basis. And last I heard, they were about $451. But the other piece of it is the personnel. And I've had many, many discussions with the department about this. And what happens is when we don't do it on a prototypical model basis, the charter schools actually get shorted because they are, say, for example, the charter school in Casper. They are 300 students out of, I don't know how many students are in Casper, 12,000. So consequently, if you take and you chop up central office and the staffing of it, the per student basis is very much smaller versus if they were a standalone entity, then what they would receive for funding for personnel would be very different and much higher than what has been suggested. I just think that this bill points out an interesting thing about the state authorized charters. First of all, like I said, we never anticipated we were going to have them. At the present time, many of our statutes don't really recognize these state authorized charters, which are different than the district authorized charters. The state authorized charters do not have the ability to negotiate. Well, they have the ability, but the chances that they would be able to convince a district to be able to perform these back office functions for them is probably about nil. So consequently, I think moving forward, is this bill perfect? No, it is not. Does it help the charter schools? You betcha it does. So I fully support this bill. But I also think that as we move forward, Madam Chair, I think I'm going to come back to you in March and suggest that we really need to take a deep dive into all of the education statutes and to make sure that they consider the differences between the state-approved charters and the district-approved charters. But in the short term, I would suggest that we try and put more equity into the state authorized charters by giving them some of the resources they need to perform the back office functions so that it's no longer coming out of the educational piece for our students. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bayteski. Does anyone have any questions? You brought up some really good points. Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else online?
Not for this one, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other testimony in the room, we'll go ahead and close public testimony. Committee, what's your thoughts on this bill? Move the bill. Okay, bill's been moved by Senator Olson. Any amendments or anything at all that you think needs to be changed or discussion? Yes, go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I don't have any amendments. I do think that we have that small concern about district charter schools renegotiating their contracts. I'm going to choose to be hopeful, and I hope that our folks that are supporting our charter school community will work with our charter schools and ensure that there is fairness and equity in those contracts for the $1,000 per ADM-ish that ends up being in a little bit of conflict as a result of this, but certainly for our district charter schools, this is the correct approach. And again, by correct approach, I mean it's moving in the right direction. I agree with all of the testimony about the fact that it's an imperfect solution. We do have recalibration coming up, and this is something which is germane to recalibration. As we start looking at how we're funding our schools, we haven't in the past really looked at charter school funding within recalibration, but it might be time to really start thinking formulaically how we appropriately fund it. And it also might be appropriate for us to really give some consideration to District 49, because what we'll find when we fund it is that if you fund prototypical school that also has the responsibilities of the back office as the district, we're going to see that that school is going to be very, very costly. And we haven't looked at it that way, but that was the discussion we had as we started getting into statewide charter schools. One of the concerns that I certainly had with changing the authorizer was these schools will cost substantially more because you don't have the district support mechanism in place, and sure enough, here we are having that conversation. So we certainly could just pay for it, or we could look to the District 49 concept, which would allow a, organizationally appropriate back office system that they can all utilize and share in. And so you'd have the benefits of a district scale for the charter schools, for the services that the district typically provides. And again, we can look at that maybe during their interim. That aspect of it might be appropriate for recalibration committee, but that also might be appropriate and perhaps more appropriate for the joint education committee to take a look at realistically creating the new district, figuring out how it would be structured, and moving that forward. So maybe we just want to take that on as an interim topic. But, I'm supporting the bill because I do think that it moves us in the correct direction for equity, Madam Chairman.
Other comments? Senator Olson?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that Senator Rothfuss is coming around on this one. He made me a little nervous at first, but I'm glad to see that he got there because I want to advance the legislation for the same reasons that Senator Rothfuss wants to advance it. And, taking the comments from Ms. Batiski, I think she was spot on. The charter schools are not being equitably funded right now when it comes to this area. And when we contemplated the initial charter school legislation, they were funded in the original legislation, and as many of you recall, it was an unfortunate compromise that removed that funding from the original bill. So I think not only is this an appropriate fix for the current time, it was originally contemplated when we were putting together legislation. So I think it gets us back to where we initially started, which is a good place to be. And I would agree wholeheartedly that during the interim, I would support taking a much deeper dive into this to try to find the right permanent solution. But I don't think that this is off enough to say we need to put the brakes on it. I think charter schools need to be equitably funded, so we need to move this forward. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Other comments?
Question.
Okay, question on the bill's been called. Would you please take roll, Ashley?
Madam Chairman, on Senate File 73, charter school funding amendments do pass. Senator Brennan?
Aye.
Senator Olson?
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss?
Aye.
Senator Scott?
Aye.
Chairwoman Schuler?
Aye.
That is 5 ayes.
Okay, the bill is passed. Would Senator Olson like to take it, or Senator Brennan? Yes, I forget, it's sure, yeah.
I'll be there to gladly back her
There
up.
you go, there's your backup plan right there. All right, moving forward. Second bill for consideration today is Senate File 98. School Board Trustees Party Affiliation. I guess I had Senator Olson on my mind because this is his bill, so I will let him go ahead and present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And if it's okay with you, I would like to just remain here in my seat.
That would be great.
Okay. So yes, I bring you Senate File 98. This is School Board Trustees Party Affiliation. The bill, I'll walk you through in a moment, but let me walk you through the bill first, and then I'll give you some kind of big overarching thoughts on why I think this legislation is important for Wyoming. The bill itself is really straightforward. Section 1 creates a new statute, 22-6-131. And what it says is that any candidate for school board trustee shall have printed on the general election ballot the political party with which the candidate is affiliated, period. Inside that statute, we also provide for rulemaking authority for the Secretary of State to have any rules necessary to implement the section. Section 2 amends existing statute. This is just conforming language with existing statute. And then Section 3 tells us that this is effective July 1, 2025. This legislation, I think, is really important for Wyoming for several reasons. Number one, it provides clear voter alignment. When we use partisan labels, one thing that we do in elections is we help voters quickly and reasonably identify candidates whose values and priorities align with their own political beliefs. When that's absent, voters have to work harder to seek out information to see if a candidate or a particular candidate's values and priorities align with them, versus when it's partisan, they can quickly identify that. So I think it helps the voters along the way. The second reason why I think this legislation is important is it actually should increase voter engagement in these elections. Partisan elections, not always, but often, are likely to increase voter turnout because they tap into the political party's efforts for getting out the vote. The enthusiasm that might exist for other candidates or might exist around a particular party or parties transfers to all candidates in a partisan election. And then I think it also provides for policy clarity. Candidates in partisan elections have clear and transparent party platforms. So there's no hiding the ball. There's no guessing where a candidate might stand on the bigger issues. Those are easily identifiable by looking at a party platform and understanding where a candidate is on a particular issue. That makes it easier for voters to know where candidates stand on key issues, whether that's school funding or standards or curriculum or whatever the issue might be that's in front of the voter. Looking to the platform can help them to quickly identify it, and it just keeps it transparent. I think it goes really well with our democratic system, in that voters know what they're getting when they vote for a candidate. So for all of those reasons, I would hope that you will strongly consider advancing Senate File 98. And I will stand for any questions, Madam Chairman.
Questions for Senator Olson? Yes, go ahead, Senator Scott.
Madam Chairman, as I understand this, you're just putting the labels on the ballot. You're not putting the candidates into the partisan primary. Is that right?
Senator Olson?
That's correct. Yeah, it's for the general election purposes only.
Other questions from committee? Okay, let's go ahead and open it up for public participation. Any testimony from the public on this bill?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yes.
Secretary of State, it's good to have you.
Great to be here at Senate Education. Don't get here that much. Glad to be here and want to get here more. I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State. To my left is Jesse Naiman, our Chief Deputy. And I appreciate the committee's time and allowing us to speak on this bill. I'm in complete and total support of Senate File 98. From a policy perspective, I've heard many constituents concerned with the issue of now being adequately informed about their candidates for school board. And I'm concerned about the current system and the lack of a partisan affiliation on the ballot currently. As the committee knows, under existing Wyoming law 22-6-123, school board trustees are on the nonpartisan ballot, and existing statute requires that no political party affiliations be listed on the nonpartisan ballot. This bill provides a transparent means by which voters can see the party affiliation of candidates for school board trustee. And our office is prepared to help in implementing this bill. Now, the crux, though, of what I wanted to say here is in relation to at what point in time will the party affiliation be on the ballot? Is it when the candidate files? Is it another date? And I understand, there's rulemaking authority in here, but I think there's a couple things to think about with respect to how this bill would work. One is the crossover deadline. Now, every year is a little bit different the way the statute sets the deadline for applying for school board in relationship to the primary. But let me use 2024 as an example. The application period for school board trustees started on, I believe, August 7th, and then it ended on August 26th. The primary was August 20th. Now, of course, the first portion of that period, crossover, would prevent an individual from crossing into another party. But then on August 21st, you'd get this 6-day period where people would be able to cross over into another primary before the deadline for applying for school board elapsed. So the question is that, from policy perspective, it's a policy question, I think, do we want that? And my answer to that is no. And I think the solution is to put the deadline, say that it's your party affiliation at the beginning of the crossover period, which would begin in May. And so we just, I'm sort of giving that idea conceptually. We had sketched out how that would look in statute, but you wouldn't move the deadline for applying for office. This is still on the general election ballot, but you'd say that it's the party you're in at the beginning of the crossover period before the primary. So I mean, in 22-6-131, after the word affiliated, you could add in as of the first day for which the candidate may be nominated pursuant to WS 22-22-202. Since these candidates aren't nominated via the primary process, you may need to finagle that a little bit, but I think you're going to have to cross-reference the primary to effectuate that idea. The other nuance to this is what happens if, August 8th, somebody applies using the 2024 calendar for school board, and at that time they're a Democrat, and then on August 22nd they change to a Republican when the crossover period elapses and crossover can begin again. I think the answer to that is probably we would transmit the last party affiliation, and that would probably be something under the current bill we'd resolve over rules, or maybe we transmit the party at the time of the application. Maybe I'd lean a little bit more on the second one. That's another nuance to this, but I think the way to resolve that and also to resolve the policy question is to just make it what party you're in on the day of the beginning of the crossover deadline for the primary in May. Thank you very much.
Questions for Secretary Gray? Okay, brought up some interesting points. Any other testimony? Sir? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Thanks for taking time. Anyone in the public that would like to come forth and testify? Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Dickie Shaner speaking on behalf of State Superintendent Megan Degenfelder. She is in support of this legislation and thinks it's a way to enhance transparency in school board elections.
Questions for Mr. Shaner? Do you have any issue with where, if there was a change in policy as where we would put this in terms of deadlines? I guess that would probably be that would just muddy the waters, I guess. But do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. We would defer to the committee and the Secretary of State's office to work through that.
Thanks so much. Go ahead.
Good morning, Senators. Thank you. I just want to take a few moments to address maybe some people's concerns with the bills regarding, the political affiliations with it.
Could you introduce yourself, sir?
Oh, yes. My name is Joseph Martinez. I am from Fremont County. So one, I think, problem that people may have with the bill is the requirement could disadvantage unaffiliated candidates, narrowing the pool of prospective candidates. Independent candidates can and still run on the ballot. Providing a political label is not a barrier to entry for running. In fact, I think it just provides voters with a more informed basis to make their decision. Voters deserve to know how this candidate would align with either established political ideologies that we know now or even new trends within political ideologies as well. Another problem people may have with this bill is the party labels may lead voters to make decisions on political identity rather than candidates' qualifications or stances. And I think, not to refute what I just said, that it will allow people to make a more informed decision. Political affiliation is just one piece of information. And like one of the previous speakers said, this would encourage people to participate more within local elections, because I think there is a lot of voter apathy within local elections. I remember the first time I voted, I didn't know all of the other positions rather than the big ticket items. So this would encourage people to maybe feel a lot more informed about how they're voting. This transparency also reduces the risk of misinformation or misleading campaigns, ensuring voters understand where a candidate's broader ideological stances lies. School board decisions often involve inherently political issues, such as curriculum standards, policies on gender and sexuality, or budget allocation. Acknowledging political affiliations doesn't create it doesn't create politicization. I can't speak, excuse me. It doesn't cause it to be political across like the infighting within the school board. It reveals it, however, allowing voters to make more informed choices about who aligns with their values. Thank you, and sorry for my tongue-tied.
Any questions for Mr. Martinez? Thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Yes, welcome.
Good
Please
morning.
introduce
I'm
yourself.
Gail Simmons. I'm with Civics 307. I also have a nonpartisan Y vote, the mission of which is all eligible Wyoming citizens are informed voters in each election. And I have been coming down here for 7-8 years, identifying that participation and competition are critical to a good democratic republic. I am absolutely in opposition to the idea of making our school boards partisan. I have been a member of the Republican Party for 50 years. I believe in the principles of the Republican Party when it comes to policy. When it comes to that part of policy that is government, it is absolutely critical that our school boards continue to make decisions that are in the best interest of the community and the students and not subject to the requirements of a political party. I know from personal experience that each time I have exercised my thinking and it goes against the party policy, I get called a rhino, even though I've been a Republican for 50 years. That is the kind of labeling that we do not need. First of all, the school boards are always focused on the well-being of our children, not political ideologies. That needs to remain. If they are required to prioritize party agendas over local needs, that will undermine the quality of our education. I don't think it excludes qualified, but it means that every single person who has any interest at all is going to the Secretary of State's point, are going to become Republicans, which is contrary to what the party really wants, which is party purity and agreement with the principles. So it actually goes against the stated ideals of the party. Students, parents, and educators deserve leaders committed to education, not party agendas. We require collaboration that is non-political, always focus on the students. It will increase campaign costs for anybody who does not go into change their affiliation, in that the party will go in and in a general election can put their money behind those who will pledge to the party over public education. We need to focus on student outcomes. That is the purpose of our school system. We all agree that better educated students is what's required, and that's what the school board needs to be focused on, not on partisan politics. These are teacher shortages and funding. Everybody has political requirements. Our school boards need to be separated from that. In fact, again, I can guarantee that I just put a target on my back because people do respond to parties. It is not a more informed voter who simply sees an R and votes. That is not what being an informed voter is. It's understanding who the person is, what their values are, and how they will individually use their judgment. I stand for any questions.
Questions for Ms. Simmons? Yes, go ahead, Senator.
You look at the current sweep of Wyoming counties and the way that people are likely to react to this. How many of the counties do you think will have any candidates that are not labeled Republican?
2. Through you, Chairman.
Ms. Simmons?
To Teton and Albany County. Everybody else, every single person who is interested, if you pass this, will become a Republican.
Other questions for Ms. Simmons? I just have one. I know the bringer of the bill talked a little bit about voter engagement and voter turnout. And I'm wondering, I try to come in neutral on every bill, and so I'm still there. Do you think this would truly increase voter engagement, or would it have a detrimental effect?
Madam Chairman, I think will have no effect. I believe that ESPC will talk about undervoting, which is the indication of non-participation. Basically, of the 50% of Wyoming citizens who are currently registered to vote, of eligible citizens, 50%, 95% vote in the general election, as opposed to about 70%, including most people who stay home in the primaries are actually Republicans. So the engagement, to the degree that it's there, is already there in the November election. So I think it would have no effect on the number of people that turn out. What the undervote is a separate matter. And I note that not one single bill coming up has really addressed participation. So I am glad that came up, but I think there's zero impact.
Just a follow-up question for you too. I know the bringer of the bill talked a little bit about, it might make it a little easier for the voters to maybe find out about where these folks lie one way or the other. Do you think I think we're kind of already lazy voters. I will say that right up front. And I know I attended our school board forum, at least in one of the districts I service, and it was very engaging. There were a couple people I didn't know, and I certainly couldn't tell from that forum who might have been a Republican, who was a Democrat, who was an independent, or anything else. I don't know if a lot of voters are like that, though. I don't know if they're just, I'm going to say it again, too lazy to get out and find out about people and do the research. But what do you feel on that?
Madam Chairman, I don't think it's laziness that causes the lack of information, but the fact that people are overwhelmed with their lives. They're busy, and they this last primary, for example, people were sick of things showing up in their mailboxes. That didn't really happen in the November, but there's a sense of overwhelm. And so one of the reasons that I created my why vote is because I actually go to every candidate and ask them to put online for them to say what are their primary considerations. And so what I saw increasingly over the last 2 cycles is that the forums are about political ideologies, the questions are, and not so much, what about how are you going to do policies? How are you going to engage parents? How are you going to engage the citizens? What is your knowledge of the budgeting process? That's one of the biggest things that a school board does, is the budgeting. And there were almost no questions on what is that candidate's understanding of how that works. It all devolved to political pledges. That doesn't help. We need to have ways to make it easier for people to understand who those candidates are. And I agree with you, it's a problem. But we need to work towards increasing that knowledge on an individual basis and not using an R or a D or a U as a substitute for understanding who that individual person is.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. I'm Jenny DeSaro. I'm the Executive Director for the Equality State Policy Center. And over here is Marissa Carpio, our Policy Director. She usually does the testifying, but I'm in town, so I'm practicing. We are an organization who is a nonpartisan organization. We're founded by a coalition of conservation, labor, and social justice organizations. We really are keen on keeping things as nonpartisan as possible. And as we can see in today's narrative, partisanship continues to increase, and it increases divisiveness, it increases people's ability to come together and find common ground. When it comes to school and education, it doesn't seem that there's a lot of need for partisan ideology. And we strongly encourage you to oppose this bill because we'd like to keep nonpartisan conversations going forward in Wyoming to create Wyoming solutions and not be influenced by outside issues and narratives that aren't really applicable to our state.
Questions for Ms. Tesoro? Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, one other comment. Where we really ought to be focusing attention on is how do we get a better turnout in our elections? And that is something that we also work on. And if we're willing to work with you, if you have some ideas, we would like to learn how to do that better too. It is a problem in Wyoming.
Okay, questions?
Yeah, Madam Chairman. Ms. Tesoro, you allude to keeping, I guess, in your words, keeping politics out of education. I'm always really confused by that statement because I'm sitting on the education committee right now for the Wyoming legislature, for the state of Wyoming, and each person on this panel has either an R or a D next to their name when they're on a ballot. So when it comes to the Wyoming legislature, we seem to say it's okay that we have partisan labels when we're dealing with educational issues, which I vote on almost every day, if not at least weekly. But for some reason that needs to be different when it's our school board. Help me understand why it's okay for me to have a partisan label next to my name on the education committee, but not for a school board trustee.
Ms. Tesoro?
Madam Chairman, Senator Olson. So you represent a large district, and school boards represent small districts and its community members. The folks are going to the school there. It's interacting on a very personal level daily. Like I had to drive all the way from Cody to get here. That is not what most of not a lot of Cody people are here because it's a long drive. So in the school district, though, you're looking at people who live next to each other. They go to churches together. They go to different churches. They interact in the community in different ways. And if you're able to keep that nonpartisan there, it creates more space for those civil conversations. And we saw in our elections across the state, at the state level elections, how aggressive and mean things got. And that is something that we would discourage. Because that is one of the reasons we would discourage this bill moving forward, because we want to increase civility and opportunity for conversation among our communities.
Yes, go ahead. Senator Rothfuss.
Yeah, following up on that and maybe taking it a step further, do you think this partisan committee would fail to be able to do our job effectively if we didn't have our R's and D's? I mean, if my little D after my name didn't show up, would we suddenly become inept and incapable of making decisions?
Ms. Tesoro?
As Chairman Schuler and Senator Rothfuss, I think you would do the same type of job you've been able to do, and perhaps even better if you were a nonpartisan.
Yeah, I
if
feel
you
like
didn't have a D or an R. I think that it removes a level and it removes a label that enables people to participate on a different level, more humane and kind way.
Thank you. Agreed.
Other questions, follow-up?
I just think Senator Rothfuss would be more effective if he had an R next to his name.
Madam Chairman, I could probably go along with the other 90% of the state and just change their D to an R so they can participate better.
Any other questions for Ms. Tesoro? Okay. Marissa, I didn't catch your last name. Did you want to say something at all?
I can get them. I'm Marissa Carpio. I'm the policy director for the Equality State Policy Center. I think the only thing that I would add is I know Gail referenced that we might have some information on undervotes. I checked Laramie County School District, and I think this is true for other counties as well. In some districts, there are multiple school board members up on those elections, so you'll see a higher undervote if people don't vote for all three or all two. And that's common because people want preferential voting. If they want this one candidate, they're going to vote for one and leave the other two blank. So I'll just provide that information, but it's also on all of the county websites.
Questions for Marissa? Okay, thank you so much for your information, your testimony. Okay, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jeff Daugherty, speaking as an individual today, members of the committee. It's great to be here with you. Madam Chair, I've made a career out of agreeing with virtually everything Senator Olson does, and I'm not going to break that tradition here this morning. But I will tell you, I spent a fair amount of time in traditional K-12 public education, and so I really appreciate the effort that's being brought forward here because I've seen the mischief. You know what, mischief's not a great word. I've seen the damage that happens when you have trustees that don't align to the community. And some of the members of this community know that I have another sickness and that I tend to not be able to resist working on political campaigns. And it's very difficult to get information out. These campaigns are significantly underfunded, not well-funded. At best, you get a few lawn signs. If you have a well-funded campaign, perhaps there's a mailer, perhaps they have a website, but trying to find information is awful. And I would quarrel gently with the previous speaker that school district trustees actually have big districts. A lot of our representatives in the House don't have districts that are on par with trustee districts. Maybe a mayor would, maybe a county commissioner would, maybe a senator would, but these are big districts. And so, Madam Chair, I would say I am supportive of the Secretary of State's comments, and that I would urge the body to support Senator Olson, as I do on a daily basis, and support this bill.
Questions for Mr. Doherty? Okay, thank you. It's great to know that he's got a friend out there.
Yeah,
So,
at least one.
welcome, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Marguerite Herman here again, speaking as a an 8-year veteran of a school board, Laramie 1, and just offer, and I'm really glad Senator Olson mentioned the whole thing about the difference between legislator and a trustee, and I'll just get to that. I've been a judge for the We the People contest, and they make and there's a very clear lesson in that, the difference between a trustee and a delegate. And as a delegate, you're representing a given constituency, and it's, you do what they want. As trustee, and as any attorney, any school board member knows in this room, is that you have, as a trustee, you have a beneficiary, undivided loyalty. That's the concept of a trust. Undivided loyalty to, and it's who, to whom is it? And it's the children. And as a trustee, you walk in, I can just, and my experience of it, and believe it, in 8 years, I think I saw just about everything come through on the agenda. But it's a trustee that is, puts aside politics, comes in, listens to the information, considers the benefit of the children, and that has to be the main of everything. Not what my party's told me, what loyalty I've already pledged, anything, or some kind of vassal label that's put on me. It is, my loyalty is to the child, to listen and weigh all the evidence and come out to the best educational decision. And I would say, as opposed to transparency, a label, a political label, it's basically, not only is it a label, but it's a statement of, I owe that party something. And then to that extent, it detracts from loyalty as a trustee, and we're called trustees, that is our title. So that's the difference between a delegate and a trustee. I would say that also it's a false premise that one's political affiliation determines how you're going to vote on everything. I mean, we all know that there is a wide range of political affiliation may be adopted for various reasons. It is not determinative of how you're going to vote on everything that comes before you. Again, you keep the children, their benefit pedagogy in front of you. It's, we had to change boundaries on a school. One of the most painful things that happened to the community, I can tell you, it had nothing to do with who was a Democrat, Republican, or Independent. It was, where are the numbers? What do we have to do for the efficiency of the district working? And it's a very complex organization as a school district. Many, many, many moving parts. And you can't bring partisan ideology to the table and base your decisions on that. So to call yourself an ROD would be misleading. It would not be transparency, it would be misleading, because it's not determinative. And anyone who's gone through two terms on a school board knows that. And the other thing is, okay, it may be difficult to learn about a candidate. That's not a reason to not do it. There are lots of sources, and if you do want the opinion of your party, who to vote for. The Republican Party in Laramie County came out and endorsed candidates. So if you want to use that, you can do it. It's not that that's not available. If what you want to do is you just can't, you don't have the time between picking up the kids and making dinner, you can't really do it. And if you do what people do all the time is they refer to someone and get a recommendation and act on it. And you can still do that today, and people do it, and the party has endorsed, I think for the past 2 elections, has come up with an endorsed candidate. So once again, the information is there either from the mouth of the candidates, it's there from the party if you want it, but to put it on the ballot injects politics into something that is nonpartisan right now for a reason. It's a set of trustees up there. And I would say, it is, and I have several notes here, sorry. So I will just say that, if people want to know what candidates are going to do, talk to them. They will tell you. And again, I think it's the performance of a school board has to be nonpartisan if you're thinking about the kids. And there are honest differences. Even given that, we had many honest differences, and we discussed, and then the vote was taken and the decision was made. And so I'm sorry, that's sort of the benefit. I tried to rush through that. I know the hour's getting short here. So that's just the benefit of 8 years on a school board where we saw a lot of different things, a lot of complicated issues came through, and politics were best left outside the door. Our beneficiary is not the voter, it's the child. So thank you. If you have any questions?
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Herman? Good. Thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Brian Farmer. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming School Boards Association, speaking in opposition to the bill. Madam Chairman, in 1650 or so, long time ago, America had a great innovation. For the very first time in the world, we established a system of public education. And that Massachusetts Bay Colony that created a system of public education felt that it was essential that that system of public education be governed by a board of selectmen. So this board of selectmen, this group that oversaw the public education system, was a nonpartisan body. So since 1650 forward, the vast majority of school boards in the United States have been nonpartisan. Interestingly, this question, should school boards be partisan, was recently before the voters in the state of Florida. And the state of Florida voted it down. The people in Florida said, that's not how we see school boards. It's not what school boards should be. So it's a fair debate to have. What should school boards be? What should they be driven by? And I think that our focus is primarily on do what's best for kids. And I don't think that that is driven by whether a person is a Republican or a Democrat. I think all people that run for school board seek to do that, to do what is best for their students, do what's best for kids. And so being in a nonpartisan office tells the potential person being elected, hey, you're not running to do this because of a party platform or a party agenda. You're seeking this position because you're seeking to do what is best for the students in your district. And that guiding light, that guiding principle is not dependent upon a party label. Madam Chair, I believe that the members of the Wyoming legislature seek to do the same thing regardless of their party label. And so Senator Olson asked a very interesting question. Does it matter whether a legislative body has labels or not? And I think that it does there, and the difference is in the nature of the governance. So legislatures, from a political science standpoint, only get things done by working on consensus. And when you have a limited time frame, the party structure allows you to have preformed consensus so that when it comes time to make policy, that is advanced. School boards govern every month, sometimes multiple times a month. And so they have the opportunity for the dialogue, for the discussion that is not based on party platform, but really based on good discussion. The vast majority of stuff that comes before a school board is not a partisan sort of issue. What's the Republican position on a bus route? What's the Democrat position on school playground equipment? I don't think that those exist. There are issues that do rise to great political interest and perhaps have partisan differences. And in that case, the school board really needs to listen to its community. The school board is elected by the exact same people that elect you. And school boards across Wyoming reflect Wyoming. The vast majority of our members that have gone on to political partisan offices have been Republicans. I would wager the vast majority of people that are elected to school boards right now are Republicans. They are Wyoming. They look like Wyoming. They're not different from you or I. As a matter of fact, we talk about, is it difficult to figure out who to vote for? Madam Chairman, I had the great fortune to serve as a school board member for a number of terms, and there were 11,000 people that voted for me in each of those elections that were able to figure out whether I was going to represent the interests of their children without a partisan label. And I wouldn't have had qualms whether or not I had to identify or answer any question on those things. But I think the good governance question, the what is good for public education is not necessarily guided by the label. And to the degree that it's challenging for members of the public to find out what a person is about, well, my goodness, I can look at labels and I can tell you, I can't necessarily peg, aha, that Republican in the Wyoming legislature thinks this way or that way. There are clear differences within the party itself. And so, Madam Chair, I don't think we advance that interest at all. The last point I would make, interestingly enough, in nonpartisan elections, the governing body pays for the election. So we have to pay the county clerk to print those ballots. In the ones that go partisan through the office, participate in the primaries, the state pays for those. So it's just an interesting tangential thing. This bill doesn't change any of that. But I think it's interesting that when we've had this experiment in place since 1650, and we've done okay with nonpartisan offices, I don't know that we have a reason to move forward with something different now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Farmer? Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room who would like to testify on this bill? Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen, Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. I'll keep my comments brief. There has been a lot of great comments today. We agree that those school board races should be nonpartisan. Largely, we've heard the role of school boards, budget, personnel. I think most folks and a lot of our students and our educators would agree that what we need less of is politics within our education system. I do want to provide, my first master's degree and the thesis work I did, which I received an outstanding master's award for, was on voter participation and mobilization. So to the question, will it increase voter turnout? No, it will not. One of the tools that people use when it comes to participation is they use what's called a heuristic. So the more that we create these shortcuts, these heuristics, the less detailed information that you're actually taking in. So to the point that Mr. Farmer raised, even within the Republican Party, we have a broad, diverse array of positions and values. And just describing to somebody that I know how this person's going to run my school because of this party label actually makes them a less informed voter. And fundamental to our democratic republic is making sure that we have an informed voter base. So wanted to provide that and would stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Mullen? I don't see any. Thank you so much for your testimony. Anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Do we have anybody online, Ashley?
No, Madam Chairman.
We don't. Okay. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and close public testimony then. And what are your thoughts on this bill? Move the bill. Okay, move the bill by Senator Brennan. Discussion? Yes, Senator.
My comment on this bill, I don't think the current system is working very well, because I think people are having trouble identifying what their school board candidates really stand for, Madam Chairman. Criticism I would have of this bill is I don't think it goes quite far enough. I think it should make it a fully partisan office with participation in the partisan primary. I think that would help our system more. I'm afraid that this bill will not make as much difference as it would have made a number of years ago, because I think the answer I got when I asked how many counties would there be anything other than a Republican on the ballot, the answer I got was 2. I think there's probably a third one, but the principle holds. Even if Fremont County might, at least in some of its districts, be partisan competitive. I think the bill is a step in the right direction, Madam Chairman, but I wish it had gone a step further.
Other comments? Senator Rothfuss?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. You know, I look around the country right now, I look around even our legislature, and we see that there's a lot of division, there's a lot of acrimony, and a lot of that is fueled by partisanship. You look at, clear back to George Washington's farewell address, where he was talking about, you know, if this nation ever really struggles, this union ever really struggles, it's going to be because political parties have advanced to the point where they create division. In other words, it'll have to be us destroying ourselves from within. We'll be strong enough from without, but if we build this tribalist mindset strong enough to the point where we vilify each other based on setting up teams and hating each other because of those teams, then we can tear ourselves apart. And here we are doing that on a daily basis. You know, I'm a member of a party. You have to do that to be in the legislature, but I don't think it's a strength. I've never looked at our institution as being stronger because we're parts of political parties that tell us how to think, what to do, establish platforms that a majority vote on, and then you're supposed to adhere to it. It's a weakness. It's not a strength. So to me, you know, contrary to the good tall senator from Turner County, I'd go the opposite direction. I would love it if we just stopped emphasizing party and started emphasizing the qualities of individual humans running for office. Are they passionate? Are they empathetic? Do they care about the issues? Do they know something about education? Wouldn't that be great if our first decision for a school board was, do they know anything about education? Right? This is a great way to just forget, not even have to look. Do they know anything about education? I don't care. They've got the right letter after their name. They put it on there. So go team. To me, this bill just moves us in the wrong direction. And it takes one office where at least they're trying to battle about the kids, the students at this point. It's what they're focused on. And tear them away from that focus and make sure that the local political parties really have more to say about it than what they, as individuals, have to say based on their expertise. And all I have to do is just point to any political body around the country right now and point to how unhealthy it is because of the partisanship as an example of what I'm talking about. We are so far down the wrong path, and this just takes us one little step further. And, you know, I'd love for us to find ways to go the exact opposite direction. Senator Olson here and I agree a lot of things, you know, and the R's and D's after our names are different. So you would think that we're just like entirely different in all ways, and that we would go sword fight in the parking lot or something, I guess. But it turns out we don't, right? We share a lot in common. But you have to get to know us as individuals to get to the point where you actually realize what we are in common on. And getting to Senator Olson's early point, this makes it easier for voters. That's a bad thing in my mind. You know, we always say, go out and vote in election season. Anytime I'm typing that message, I say, get informed and then go out and vote. Because just voting for a letter, that's not helping. And I'm not one of those voters who's cast strictly D votes in my life. I've cast a lot of R votes because the R was the better candidate, more knowledgeable, better in the position. And I only know that because I did the research beforehand. And it's regrettable that we're at that point. So the idea that making it easier for voters, I mean, there used to be a time when you could just push D or R at the top of a ballot, apparently. I haven't seen this type of ballot, but I've heard stories about just vote R, just vote D, and then walk away. You know, what a bad system. But we're practically there now. I have, and you all can, you won't be surprised by this. You know, I've been on porches where they've said, wow, I agree with everything you say. I really appreciate you being here. I've never voted Democrat in my life, and I'm not going to. Not going to vote for you. But boy, you sure seem like you know what you're talking about. So I shake their hand and go on my way. And maybe you all haven't had that conversation. I don't know. I've had it multiple times. And it's regrettable. Because if I just hadn't, if they hadn't asked, are you an R or a D, and it hadn't been on there, they agreed with me. And I would have represented them well, and I probably still do anyway.
Other comments? I would just share, you know, I think I'll probably be a no vote on this. I generally try to move things forward when I can, if it looks like it needs to be, and it may very well move forward, and maybe someone will change my mind up on the floor, maybe Senator Olson will, but, and I think probably the testimony today was really good on both sides. I served in a nonpartisan city council office for 2 terms, and I really liked the fact that it was nonpartisan, and politics never entered in, really. We just did the best things for our city that we could. I think Senator Rothfuss is correct. You know, ultimately, we want school board members that are just going to do the best things that they can for our kids. I thought about when I went to this forum that I mentioned earlier, and I really thought about that. I thought, you know, I really couldn't have told you where any of those folks were in terms of their party. But I think what really probably talks to me more or makes more of an impact is the fact that, and I apologize for saying voters were lazy. A lot of them just didn't get out and vote, so I shouldn't say lazy. I'll apologize for that. I think part of it was because they were a little overwhelmed. This campaign season was ugly. It was very negative, and I don't blame a lot of the folks for just saying, I don't even want to bother with this. And so hopefully we can do something about that, get more people to the polls, but I'm not sure this is the way to do it. I just want to vote for people in a nonpartisan school board election that are really have our kids, their best interests in mind. And I think sometimes when you involve the parties, that's when you get, we obviously saw some dark money coming into the campaigns, and I would hate to see that go into our school boards and make those as ugly as what we saw with some of our elections this past year. So just want to explain my no vote, and with that, is there any other discussion? Okay. Let's go ahead and take roll, Ashley.
Madam Chairman, on Senate File 98, School Board Trustees, Party Affiliation, do pass. Senator Brennan?
Aye.
Senator Olson?
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss? No. Senator Scott?
Aye.
Chairwoman Schuler?
No.
3 aye, 2 no.
Okay, this bill is passed. I assume you would love to take this up there on the floor, Senator Olson?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your testimony.